go hang out with some girlfriends, or maybe watch a movie solo, like things you can't really do with a kid. And then the wee night, which has been hard to get more regularly, but this is when we travel to see family. It's more like a date night.
It's important for us to maintain some sense of our pre-baby self. And so given all of that, it feels really important to us and totally in line with our own philosophy of being able to have people help us so that we can do all the things that we want to do.
Welcome to Startup Dad, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of dads who are also leaders in the world of startups and business. I'm your host, Adam Fishman. A lot of hard-working professionals are nervous about their foray into parenting. To learn more about how one power couple has made it all work, I talked to Jamie Lee and Jeff Okita. Jamie started her career in retail and technology and now runs her own consulting business called JME Labs. Jeff is the VP of product at leave management platform company Tilt. They're husband and wife and parents of a 14-month-old daughter. On today's episode, we talked about the concept of the extended team, the 4 C's, coordination, communication, compromise, and creativity, and the concept of me, and we nights. We spent a lot of time on flying. They've taken their daughter on 15 flights and 2 international trips. And also, how to maintain your sense of self after your baby arrives. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast player so you never miss a weekly episode. Welcome, Jeff and Jamie, to Startup Dad. It is a pleasure having both of you here today. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Adam.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Awesome. Well, there are obviously 2 of you. This is not a normal recording of Startup Dad. Usually there's only one, and it's a dad. But hey, I love having couples on here. So let's do it. You are a 2 working parent household with a 14-month-old. Jeff, you're the VP of product at a startup. And Jamie, you run your own consulting business, helping startups and small businesses. Not exactly what I would describe as lightweight jobs. And you mentioned, as we were preparing for this, that requires figuring out or finding your extended team. So tell me what the extended team is in your household.
I think I am very much a pragmatist in terms of just how many hours there are in a day. And I know that both Jamie and my jobs are pretty intensive. And then also just it's important for us to maintain some sense of our pre-baby self. And so given all of that, it feels really important to us and totally in line with our own philosophy of being able to have people help us so that we can do all the things that we want to do. So it was pretty important for us to surround ourselves with either experts that can help guide us through parenthood or people that can help us with our training or our nutrition or all these different things that are just important components for us. And so when we talk about our extended team, that means everything from a full-time nanny, a nutritionist. Jamie and I share a nutritionist, run coaches. Jamie has several other coaches for the races that she does, family and friends, household management. And I mean, we even view things like ChatGPT as part of our extended team. So it's really the whole gamut.
Do either of you have any family that's nearby?
My family's in Seattle, so within driving distance. So if we need help in a pinch for weekends, but nothing within striking distance of like, hey, we need emergency help tonight. Can you come over?
What have you had to do in like an emergency or have you had an emergency situation?
We have not yet gotten to the point where we have kind of the escalation call list of like, oh, okay, the nanny's not free. Who's next on the list? We haven't yet quite set up those things, but I think we do need it. And I think part of that is our daughter is not going to daycare yet. And so it's not bringing home a bunch of germs. And then you like really need that childcare escalation support just in case, the nanny's not willing to come or something like that. So for us right now, when we have a scenario where we have to take care of Arden, we have to blow up our calendars. Jamie takes a slot, figures out how to move her meetings around. I have to do the same thing. And so it just requires a ton of communication and juggling to just cover the hours that we need to.
So we're a dual working household, very intense jobs. The 2 of you described a concept to me of that I will call the 3 C's, which is coordination, communication, and compromise. And Jeff, you just kind of named like all three of them in one scenario. I would probably add a fourth too, which is like creativity, like getting creative on stuff. How do the 3 or 4, or maybe there's like 20 C's work in your household? Tell me about coordination, communication, and compromise.
Yeah. I'll actually start with the creative because I feel like that's something that we've had to be really dynamic in working together with. I know as an individual, as a mom, it's all about multitasking. Like, what can I do with baby? So, for instance, outside of the day job and work, there's like workouts and continued learning and podcasts that I want to listen to. Oh, and by the way, I have to take care of the baby from 4 to 6 p.m. So, usually, what I'll do is I'll go for a run, sometimes with the baby while listening to a podcast. And when I tell my non-parent friends that, they're like, that sounds really dry and complicated. But I was like, hey, when you need to finish 3 things at once, what can you do in combination with one another? Or if I need to run a really critical errand during the day, it's like, okay, what can I do when childcare is here? And can I just do a ton of my heads down work at night when Arden goes to sleep at 7 or 8 p.m.? Like, what are my child free hours where I can still do focused work or go and run errands when things are open? So I think it's getting really creative with the calendar and looking for ways to not only like double multitask, but seeing if I can do 3 things at once. Part of my motherhood journey, I was nursing and pumping for the first year, and we were at Disney World. And I was like, well, we don't want to miss out on this line. So I kind of strapped her on, put a cover on it, and I was like, well, she's going to be fed while we wait in line. So it's like you have to get really creative in finding ways to do the things you want to do while still raising a child.
What about like communication for the two of you? I don't know, Jeff, if you have any rituals or processes that you do around communication.
Part of it comes naturally because Jamie and I lean into the organization a lot, and just with our busy schedule, it just kind of comes naturally that we know that we need to stay in really good communication with us to make sure that we cover all the things that we need to do. So we do have it scheduled. We have like a shared Google Calendar. We have some time frames where we can map out the week. We have monthly check-ins on the calendar as well. It ends up being a lot more fluid than that we have that time reserved, but it just comes naturally that we know that as it comes to Sunday evening and we have a really busy week, that we touch base to figure out like what's going on in your world, what's going on in mine. Are there any expected time blocks that one of us needs to cover? Even like how are we feeling? And like if one of us needs a bit more of a break, figuring out how we can carry the load. And so I think it's really important to stay in touch with your partner when everything is busy. Aside from work, I think Jamie is a little bit underplaying some of her workouts. She really competes in some of these races that she does. And so when she's working out, it's a 90-minute intensive thing, 6 days per week. And so it takes up a tremendous amount of time. And so that's important to her, important for her goals. And so that just means less hours in the day that she has to be available to take care of Arden. And so balancing that and figuring out how I can also take my time to prioritize some of the things that I want to, it's all kind of this juggling act that I don't think is possible unless you have some of these rituals and you can be open about your needs and your desires and be on the same page as your partner.
I'm curious too about like compromise. So where have the two of you had to make trade-offs, or when does that like dual track of communication and compromise come into play with a young, 14-month-old?
So we call it me, and we. So that means every 3 to 4 weeks, Jeff gets an evening to himself. So it's anytime after childcare ends, so 4 p.m. onwards. I get an evening to myself. That can be like, hey, solo spa time, get my nails done, or go hang out with some girlfriends, or maybe watch a movie solo, like things you can't really do with a kid. And then the we night, which has been hard to get more regularly, but this is when we travel to see family. It's more like a date night or a night out with friends that we get to do together, leave Arden at home to give us a sense of almost like pre-parenthood sanity, or the things that we enjoyed to do previously. We want to make sure that still continues on. And the compromise is more like, okay, this night I'm on full on baby duty. The other night, Jeff's on full on baby duty, and then also working with our family to say like, hey, can you also cover? And it's definitely a balance. We both travel a lot, sometimes for business, sometimes for pleasure, individually or together. So that gets a lot more complicated when you bring a child into the picture.
And that means that this Wednesday, I might take it. Next week is Jamie. And then the third week, we're doing something together. So that means that you're really only soloing the child for one day every 3 weeks. And so that creates a lot of balance and just kind of prioritizes you, making sure that you have some time to yourself, which I think is like really, really critical and important. Like Jamie and I were not the type of individuals before becoming parents that we were never eager and rushed to become parents. It was the right time and circumstance for us to do that. We're both pretty independent people, and we knew that having a kid was going to challenge some of that dynamics. And so it was always important for us to design kind of a process, systems, tools in place for us to maintain that sense of self in a pretty strong way. And so I think those rituals become super important to us and something that we're going to continue on. I know it's going to get harder. And so when that happens, relying on these rituals and those routines really kind of anchor you into a cadence of being parents.
In addition to these me and we nights, other things that I heard you mention, you do like Sunday check-ins and you kind of look at the logistics of the week. You mentioned a shared calendar. You've got your planned, solo times and together times. Where did you get the inspiration for this?
I'll call out the me and we nights because that actually came from a coworker of mine. I was preparing for my leave of absence from work. A lot of my coworkers have kids or relatively younger kids. And one of them, my VP of client success, he mentioned that that's something that he prioritizes with his wife and his family. And so I think Jamie can speak to this, but we've learned so much from other people. That's probably been one of the primary ways is talking to other parents is really, really critically important. And I know that Jamie's part of lots of communities that help with that.
For me, it's also been like word of mouth and friends, more like reverse engineering into it. When I asked them, I was like, hey, what's been the most challenging thing about parenting? They've said it's, I don't get enough me time, or we don't do date nights anymore, or I forget what it's like to travel. So it's almost like going back into that to say, how do we not fall into that path? And what can we do to troubleshoot? So it's like we kind of both came to the conclusion, but through different means. But it's great that we're able to land on a process that Jeff implemented to make sure there's something recurring on our calendar that reminds us, oh, a fun night out.
Both Jamie and I are type A people. We prepare, we research, all this kind of stuff. And so when we were about to have our baby, I mean, we read through the things, we listened to podcasts, all of this different stuff. But nothing can prepare you because there are so many nuances and little decisions that are just not going to surface in those materials. And so that's where really relying on parents and having that kind of feedback loop where you can text someone about a scenario and feel like, what do I do in this situation? Like we've had various situations where it's like we don't know what to do and how to deal with it. And probably one of the best decisions we made early on was to hire a postpartum doula right after Jamie gave birth, because there was just like these endless amount of moments where Jamie and I would just look at each other and be like, how do you cut a kid's toenails? How do we do this? And so to have someone that can really guide you and teach you through these processes, it really jump-started our knowledge of like, how do you take care of this fragile, tiny little baby?
You hinted at travel a few minutes ago, and I want to talk about travel now because in learning about the two of you and your travel plans with your daughter, I was blown away. You've taken 15 flights with your daughter, including 2 international flights. Now, she is 14 months old, and you've taken 15 flights. So you've averaged more than 1 flight a month since she's been born. That's impressive. I don't know that I've taken my kids who are now almost 13 and 10 on 15 flights. Maybe, but that's a lot of flights. I want to hear about your travel hacks for taking a 14-month-old / all the way down to a young baby on a plane. And then we'll get to some of maybe the opposite, the darker side of travel.
So I'd say like some of the travel hacks, what we've found is that especially when she was young, so she took her first flight, I want to say between 2 to 3 months. So after we felt like, okay, her health is like more stable. She's not like this tiny child anymore. She's a little bit more functional. It was easy because she was sleeping all the time. It was actually a lot harder after 8 months, which is when she was crawling and more mobile, and you needed to distract her in so many different ways. But it just became a very comfortable napping spot, and we were lucky because she would fall asleep on a carrier. So we could just wear her the whole time, and it was just like a little weighted vest on us for a couple of hours. The needs are pretty simple: sleep, milk, and just like a nice little cover. It's pretty easy pre 8 months.
Jamie and I were prolific travelers before we had baby Arden. We were used to it. We would get to the airport 45 minutes before, have our one carry-on and backpack. We had the routine down. We were ready to go, seasoned travelers. Traveling with your baby before 8 months is not as hard as it is post 8 months. Definitely not as hard as probably a 2-year-old. We're coming up on that. It's definitely not easier than what it was before. So you do get used to it. And the first time is very scary to try to figure out how you're going to do all this stuff. Is the baby going to be okay? But the more that you do it, the easier it gets. And we've never had an issue with another person on the flight complaining because our baby is crying or anything like that. I think that was one of the biggest fears of, am I going to be that parent on the plane where the baby is just crying and crying and crying and someone's going to call them out? It just doesn't happen. I mean, you hear about that happening sometimes, but it's an exception rather than the norm. Everyone is willing to help. There have been plenty of times in which someone saw that I was carrying way too much stuff and they offered to help me carry some things. The baseline is that people are going to be helpful for parents that are traveling with a kid. And that was just really, really comforting to know.
You mentioned 2 international flights. So where have you taken Arden internationally?
We took her to Japan and Taiwan, like month 3, and we specifically looked at destinations that tended to be pretty baby friendly. So there were a lot of changing tables wherever we went, even in subway stations. There were nursing rooms. So it's like it really catered to younger babies. A lot of places were stroller friendly. So those are some of the factors. And then our second international trip was for Jeff's cousin's wedding to the Philippines just a couple months ago. So she was nearing 1 at that time. So we can already contrast like, oh, the 3-month-old potato was a lot easier to take with us than this 11-month-old kid who wants to run around, but we need her to be strapped to us.
This is actually really interesting. You mentioned that there's like different phases for kids. You mentioned the potato phase. There's also a plant phase and a puppy phase. I used to refer to 6-month-old babies as the potted plants because you could basically just put them somewhere and they would kind of sit there, maybe like slump over a little bit, but they'd mostly sit. So tell me about the potato, plant, and puppy phases. Obviously, your daughter's probably in the puppy phase now, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. When people ask me parenthood and stuff like that, I often think about it in these phases. There was the first 2.5 months of life in which there was not a lot of interactivity and I didn't even know if she knew or cared who I was. And so it's like, this is a potato. She's just there and I've got to make sure that she's fed and she takes naps and she has shelter and all that kind of stuff. But you start to shift into this phase where maybe they start to smile at you and maybe possibly recognize you a little bit. And that's a little bit more of like maybe the relationship you have with a plant where you have some sort of emotional connection to this thing, but then also, not a ton of engagement. And then I think for us, around 11 months on, Arden really became communicative to us. We taught her some basic baby sign language, things like that. But I mean, you could tell she knows who we are, prefers hanging out with us, all of these things. She acts like a puppy. She's crawling around and starting to play and all these different things. And yes, she's a mini human also, but she's not quite at that phase where she's really like saying things to really have that frame of mind that, oh, this is an actual toddler. She's very much in the puppy phase right now.
We traveled with her when she was a potato and she was like 2 or 3 months. And that's when we went to Japan and Taiwan. And then most recently, when she's around a year, you went to the Philippines, which is, by my calculations, a very long trip. How do you entertain the puppy, the 11 or 12-month-old? So did you just like turn her loose and let her like waddle up and down the aisles? Like, what do you do in that situation?
If the plane was okay, to be like, you know what? Someone else can just take care of the puppy. She can entertain you. We try not to be the parents that give her a ton of screen time during the day. But like, if you want to wiggle around all the time, we'll let you watch whatever movie we're watching, or we'll throw Bluey on for a little bit. She was very interested in water bottles, like empty water bottles and empty pretzel containers. So we're just like, okay, crinkle away, have fun with that. You try all these things to entertain them, but it's a little bit of screen time, walking up and down the aisles and trying to get her to play with whatever is in front of her.
Okay, now we're going to go to the dark side of travel. What's the like biggest travel horror story that you've encountered on the, 15 flights or so that you've gone on?
I think the biggest thing that is always a risk with traveling, especially when your baby is still relatively young, is the risk of blowouts when you're traveling. There was this time frame, this phase that Arden had where she did not poop for 10 straight days. Again, that's one of those things of like, man, if we didn't have the experts to guide us through that, I mean, we would be freaking out. 10 days of no poop is not typically normal, but our nanny, our pediatrician, all of them said like, this can happen sometimes. Let's wait it out, all this kind of stuff. But when you're also traveling and your baby hasn't pooped for 10 days, you have this ticking time bomb strapped to your chest and you don't know what's going to happen. So I was always a little scared whenever we were prepared to travel of just figuring out, okay, when's the last time that he poops? Are we coming up on a time frame? And I think like we've narrowly avoided it, but we've had some close calls, at least on the flight. That time where she didn't poop for 10 days, she ended up pooping when we got to the parking lot of the airport. And right before I was able to like go into the airport and like strap her in.
So when you travel with her, do you bring a bunch of extra clothing and stuff? I mean, it's been a long time since I've had a really young baby. So I imagine you just got to like pack it in there just in case.
A change of clothes for both parents and the baby on the airplane is helpful. Making sure you have enough diapers and wipes and things like that. Definitely, I think the elevation can promote some of those things. We've definitely learned to just have those things available because you don't want to be in a position where you don't have anything and everyone is just a mess. For the most part, I would say like 95% of the time we were well prepared, but there were some scenarios where we were left with the consequences of our decisions. We definitely had an incident at the Taipei 101 Tower, which is like this huge tower in Taipei. And we were staying at a hotel right across the street. And so we were just going to go for a quick trip up, take the elevator up to the top. There's a nice coffee shop over there. So I didn't bring very much. I pretty much brought Arden. Maybe I had a few small things with me. For the most part, we just kind of carried her up there. And of course, she decided to have a blowout in her onesie while I was just holding her. And we had no extra change of clothing. We had some wipes and one diaper, so we were at least able to change that. I didn't have anything to change her out of, and she stained her onesie. And so I had to go to the bathroom and just wash it in the sink and then trying to blow dry the thing under the hand dryer just to get it as dry as possible. And then we had to go down to a store downstairs. We ended up going to Zara, which was like the only store that was available. And the smallest size they had was 12-month-old. So it's like we gave her an oversized t-shirt at 3 months and she just swam in it. But that was the only thing we could do.
I was thinking like, oh, maybe you bought a scarf at Zara and just like wrapped her in it or something like that.
It's a great idea.
Okay. So really quick follow-up too. Let's say she's got to go on the airplane or she goes on the airplane. It's not like you get a lot of warning here. It just happens. Are you change on the seat people or have you attempted the change in the airplane bathroom? Because I'd never quite figured out like what's the right move here.
We do the bathroom, or at least I do the bathroom. Jeff, you can speak for yourself. But I was like, well, people are eating next to me. They have drinks. It's kind of rude. And I entertain her. I bring her fidget toy to the bathroom. I stick it on the ceiling so she has something to look at. And she's like relatively calm on the changing table.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use the bathroom, but I think like we have traveled enough to know that you're just in survival mode. And if you need to change your baby on the table that you have in front of you, like just do what you need to do. We definitely try to make sure that we have enough time and we can get to the restroom and do that. But I definitely don't blame parents who just need to change this diaper right here and there and have just got to do what they got to do.
So there is a theme here from the both of you is not losing your own sense of self and your priorities after you have a kid, and figure out how to integrate that kid into the things that you still want to do. You're probably not doing everything you were doing before you had Arden, but you're still running. Jamie, you're still traveling, you're still doing things like that. I'm curious, was that a set of conversations that the two of you had to have as you were thinking about starting a family, as Arden was born? How did you kind of get on the same page around, well, here's how we want to live and how we want to do this? Or maybe this is an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, I'd say like before Arden was born, there were things that we knew that we loved to do together. One, which is travel, spending time with friends and family and exploring the world. And we wanted to instill that in Arden. We always believe like if we bring the child along for the ride and the adventure, typically he or she will kind of enjoy what you're doing. Or if not, their opinions will surface later on. But for now, she can enjoy the ride. So I think we kind of mapped out at a high level what do we care most about together, and then individually, what are our non-negotiables? For me, that was fitness, friends, and then my work. And then for Jeff, that was primarily your work and then kind of independent time to yourself that you could spend with friends, family, or yourself. And so if we knew that, then we were tactical to say, like, how do we then block out the hours of the day, whether it's when we have childcare or dividing and conquering later in the evening, so that whatever hours we need for those important blocks will be fulfilled. And that's an evolving conversation because needs change. But we said, like, okay, if these are non negotiables for now, how do we make sure each individual feels satisfied with the time for it? And doing check ins, we do loose check ins every month to say, like, okay, how are we tracking against this? Do we feel like anything's lopsided? Like the last couple of weekends and this upcoming weekend, I'll be traveling again solo. So then it's like, okay, when does Jeff get his solo weekend alone? So it's like making sure the balance is in tow so everyone feels like they're fulfilled as an individual in addition to being a parent.
It was hard to predict or to try to anticipate how we're going to feel after becoming parents. So there's definitely some value in trying to find alignment before you actually have your child, but so much of your circumstances is shaped by the actual tendencies of your kid. And if your kid is not sleeping and not feeding and you're going through some hard times, then naturally you may have to sacrifice a little bit more. And I think that's where, again, that kind of investment in experts to really help guide us and make sure that we're on the right track and doing some best practices gave us some of this space to still invest in ourselves. But I mean, it truly is the limiting thing is the number of hours that you have in your day. And the priority is Arden. And Arden is gracious enough to allow us to still have some time to invest in the things that are important to us. We are grateful for that. But we also know that it may change over time. And so we're trying to appreciate what we have right now and just know that it may continue to evolve. And when it does, then Jamie and I have to sit down and figure out like, hey, circumstances have changed. Like travel is a lot harder now. I'm anticipating that's going to happen when Arden hits 2, not to mention you'll have to start paying for a seat also. So that's a factor. And then we have to think a little bit about like, okay, what does this mean then? If travel is important to us, does that mean that we're just going to make it work and deal with the hard stuff? Does that mean we're going to pause? And if we pause, does that unlock more opportunities to have more play dates with local kids here? And we could find joy in that. So I think like while we do want to invest in what's important to us now, we're also people that are flexible enough to find new loves and find new passions and find new balance.
Thank you both for sharing that. I want to talk about a couple topics that you both suggested might be a little contrarian for this episode. So the first one, I don't know which one of you suggested this, but this idea that having a kid caused you to rethink how important work is. What does that mean?
Both of us lean pretty heavily into that sentiment. I think for me, when I was pregnant, I was on my fractional and portfolio journey, kind of leaving the corporate world behind for a chapter, a season, or maybe for a longer time. And I read the book Die with Zero. I got that recommended by my career coach. Again, this team of experts. And she's like, read it. Just let me know what you think. We almost had our own mini book club. And it really started to reshape how I wanted to design my life with Jeff, with Arden, with family and friends. And the big takeaway is what are the moments and experiences that I want to engage with in life at different milestones, maybe at 40 or 45 or 50, or like I want to go to a ski and snowboard trip in the Alps, or you want to be able to work out of Hawaii for 3 months, just making up some hypothetical examples. Then how do you create your career to give you enough money to sustain that lifestyle? So almost was like, what are the life experience I want? And then how do I have a career that's meaningful to me, but still backs it up? Whereas my whole life pre-parenting was all like, okay, career focus. And then what's next? What else can I accomplish? And it became a little bit more like, okay, the superficial elements, but it wasn't really tugging at the core of like what is most meaningful to me at life. And I think reading that book and then becoming a parent really solidified that. It's like, oh, when I spend time with Arden, it's like, oh, I could do this for a few hours. And do I really want to take care of that one thing with a client? And it's like you start to rebalance ways to capture joy in your life in different ways. And it's not just all about you, but it's also raising another human, an individual, and seeing them grow. And that teaches a lot about yourself too. Then you start to think of what moments can we have together. And I think flipping that pyramid almost like on its head was a pretty significant change for me. And I wouldn't say work is on the back burner, but it's just a part of my life, not the only pillar of my life.
Yeah, it's like work is before you're thinking about a family and things like that. It's all about what's coming next with work. Where am I going next on that career ladder? And now sounds like the way you're describing it is maybe more of a means to an end. What do I want to accomplish in life? And how do I structure the career or the work that I want to do that's going to get me to that goal, which sounds great. What about you, Jeff? How's your relationship with work changed as you become a parent?
It has definitely evolved in the sense that I'm much more hyper conscious of the time and where I'm investing my time. I think both Jamie and I, pre Arden, would work pretty long days. We liked what we did. We were in impactful roles. It was sort of needed that we worked that hard. I'm still in a role like that, the VP of product at a Series B, venture backed company that's trying to make it. And I am very conscious that I have to be able to show up at work as my best self and to really be super effective in the time that I have, because I am also not willing to spend the time that Arden is awake and with us. The nanny leaves at 4. She goes to bed around 7:30. And so I have 3.5 hours of precious time with her and Jamie. And I don't want to just waste that just working during that period of time. So it's caused me to be much more creative with the hours that I work and doing certain things, like if there's a meeting in which I don't have to be an active participant in that meeting, I ask for a recording and I can do that recording and listen to that recording while I'm straightening up for the nanny in the morning or I'm going for a run. It's those types of things in which it allows us to be creative to just fit it all in. But it's just continuing to evolve for me of just thinking through, to what extent can I get it all done? And I'm hanging in on that, but it's definitely hard, challenging, and it continues to be something that Jamie and I talk about of like, how do we handle all the responsibilities that we have? And also knowing that it's going to continue to change, that Arden's needs are going to evolve. Her bedtimes might change, her nap times might change, all of these different things. When she goes to daycare, all of those things will shift the equation a little bit, and we just have to be agile and adjust as a result.
Okay, the second thing that I wanted to talk about that's is a contrarian topic you mentioned was around connection with your baby. So I have heard dads talk about this a little bit before, but there's a general belief that connection just kind of happens. But I'm not sure that was necessarily both. I don't know if that's both of your experiences or one of your experiences, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on connection and the work, how it happens or doesn't happen, the work you have to put in to make it happen.
I'd say for me, I think there's this image of, hey, a mom births a baby, and the moment you see the baby, it's like love at first sight. But the reality is like they kind of look like a naked mole rat when they come out. And Arden, when you listen to this when you're older, yes, you did look like a very cute naked mole rat. And it's just like, oh, this is my child. But okay, now what do I do? Your body's almost in a state of shock. And then it's like, okay, now I have to keep this little human alive. And so there's not enough moments to think of like, oh, now I have to bond with this baby. So I'd say for me, it took a few days. I think each individual is different. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's instant. But for me, I didn't feel that way like right off the bat. And I think there's a notion of like, should you feel guilty? Does this feel weird at all? But it takes time to warm up. And it's like, you want to feel like, oh, this person knows that I'm here and I know they're here, like a true human connection. And when they're that young, they're just trying to survive. So I'd say for me, it wasn't instant, but there is this societal norm that it feels like, oh, should it feel instant?
It's definitely something I've heard a lot of dads say. It's also interesting and refreshing to hear you say that too, Jamie, that it can take some time as a mom. Jeff, I've heard a lot of dads on this show come on and say, you're kind of useless for the baby for the first couple of months. You're not useless for mom and you're not useless for like doing all of the things in the environment, but like, that instant connection to the baby is definitely not necessarily there for a lot of dads. I don't know if that was your experience or how you think about that.
I think there's definitely an element of truth in that. And there's a little bit of truth also in the fact that in the first couple of months, like I understand the point of view of non-birthing parents feeling a little useless. I mean, a couple things here. One is, for me, connection is like a two-way thing, right? And when you are staring at a potato and they don't even know that you're there or might not even be able to see you, yeah, it's hard to form that connection. And like I saw my bonds with Arden strengthen as these very concrete moments in my mind when she first smiled back at me. And when she first had stranger danger in the sense that she was fine being carried by me, but when I tried to hand her off, she didn't like that. And that somehow made me feel as though, oh, she cares who I am. And like those are the moments in which you start to build that connection and that preference because you know that this little baby actually sees you and, wants to be around you. And I've definitely seen sort of that increase kind of my connection and affinity towards Arden. And then like on the point of that first couple months, Jamie chose to have Arden natural birth and no drugs or anything like that. And, I was by her side all through that. And something fundamentally changes with, of course, the birthing partner, but also for me, watching your partner go through that. It kind of slaps you in the face of what the person who's having the baby has to do, carrying that baby, going through childbirth, and then if you choose to breastfeed, all the work that's involved with that. It's just a tremendous amount that I don't get to partake in. I'm not doing that. I'm not carrying the baby. I'm not giving birth to it. I'm not breastfeeding the baby. And so in my mind, I mean, we had talked a little bit about this, Jamie and I as well, that for as long as she is breastfeeding, I think it's fine for me to take on, to over index in some of those other things that need to happen, changing, putting the baby down to bed, all this kind of stuff, waking up early in the morning, because there's just so much sacrifice that's done in being the birthing parent. And I just felt it was a bit of my responsibility to even that out by carrying a bit more of the load, even during those first 2 months. So when you talk about some of the sacrifices and compromises that you have to make, well, definitely there was a moment 1 month in where Jamie was still recovering from childbirth. Arden was crying. We weren't sleeping very well. And I felt a little shell shocked. I was like, there is no routine. I don't know where I am. Everyone's relying on me for everything. And it was totally overwhelming. But that's kind of what was needed in that moment. It was not about me. It was about the baby, and it was about Jamie, and it was about this family. So I had to throw out all these things that I wanted to do or what I needed in that moment to just make sure that the family was taken care of. And I sort of think that that's the role that you need to play during the first couple of months is you have to carry your own side of the weight because your partner carried a lot.
One of the things that you both had mentioned is this idea of like, there's kind of a default, I put default in quotes, set of work that tends to fall on the birthing parent. And I think what you're describing there, Jeff, is like, we kind of need to reject that. This has actually started to come up a little bit more in this show. So, Jamie, what are your thoughts on this? Like rejecting that kind of default that tends to come in society?
Yeah, I really appreciate the questioning of the default birthing parent. And, if another family chooses that the default weight goes on the birthing parent, that's like all the more fair to them too. But I think for us and in our situation as a birthing parent, the default isn't just emotional, mental, but it's a lot of it in the first month or two is physical. So
Mm,
I also chose to nurse and pump really for the first year of Arden's life, but you're tethered to this child or a pump every 2 to 4 hours. And
yeah.
it's like, oh, I'm on the clock. I've got this amount of free time before I need to be tethered to one or the other. So I think when you're on this clock and you're physically sharing your body with someone else, there's the physical and mental and emotional component to it that I think the non-birthing parent may see but not fully experience. So those are hours each day that are already spoken for. But I love the more progressive notion these days where people are starting to rebalance that a little bit and really shine light on a lot of the physical toll and the time commitment it really takes for the birthing parent. And I think I've seen some stats too that it can equal to a 30+ hour job if you think about feeding and cleaning and all of that. So when you think about that, it's like, oh, if the mom is working plus doing all these things, we're looking at a very long work week where there's no time for you.
That's pretty great. And I'm glad that the two of you have found a way to kind of reject that default. And, we could talk about it on here. Jeff, there is one other thing that I wanted to bring up, which is I think maybe you mentioned this, that maybe you thought you were going to be a different type of parent before Arden was born. And then she's born. And then you're like, oh, I'm not the parent that I thought I was going to be. I'm bringing something different to this. So what do you mean about that?
I sort of thought that I was going to be like the fun parent, like the fun dad. And like, I think that's part of because I'm naturally pretty laid back and Jamie is high intensity, all of those aspects. That was totally wrong. Jamie is the fun parent. Arden loves playing with Jamie, like fake wrestling, throwing her up in the air, all that kind of stuff. She just knows she gets to play when she's with Jamie. But I'm much more of kind of maybe more traditional caretaker type of thing, not the fun dad. And just kind of shows like it's just really hard to predict beforehand. It's hard to know. You kind of settle into different roles and you guys get different things out of the relationship with your child. And so I'm totally fine with that. I'm fine with the role that I'm playing. I love seeing Jamie play with Arden, and I love the kind of joy and the smiles that Arden has when Jamie throws her into the air as high as she can. It's just a lot of fun to see.
Well, and there may still be time to become fun dad
Right.
if that's what you desire. So, Jamie, how do you feel about that moniker, fun mom?
I like it. I dig it. I didn't know what kind of parent I would be because, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't even sure that I wanted to be a parent or mom even
Mm,
before we went on this journey. So it's like, I think we eventually got to that space where, like, okay, we're ready to have a family, but it was more neutral to positive than like, oh, heck yes, 10 out of 10, I want to be a mom. And I think people should be more open about that conversation. So for me, it's like, I don't know what kind of mom I'm going to be. We'll just kind of go with the flow, see what happens. But I was like, oh, it's like a mini version of us that we get to hang out with. And it's like, I'll put her on my shoulders. We'll do some squats together. When we go to the airport, I'll like get a workout and I'll put her on my luggage and we push it around like a sled and she has fun with it. And I was like, oh, this is kind of just like a buddy that I get to hang out with.
Okay, I wanted to ask you, Jeff. So you work in the leave management industry, which I actually didn't even know was an industry until I learned about what you do and I dug into it a little bit more. So there's all forms of leave. There's obviously parental leave that we think about for parents, but then there's, long-term care leave, there's disability leave, there's all that sort of stuff. I think you probably get a front row seat to observing a lot of the challenges that people have in taking leave from work. What have you noticed about those challenges being like working directly in this industry?
It's really interesting and a really, really difficult challenge. The US does not have a federal paid leave benefit, and pretty much the vast majority of people will need to take some sort of a leave of absence for parental leave or any of those other things. If you get injured, you have to take a medical leave of some sort. You have to take a step away from work to recover, take care of life, basically. If you're fortunate enough to live in a state that has a state paid benefit, then you're able to get some of your wages subsidized when you take a leave, typically up to 60% of your wages, so that you don't have to make this impossible choice of, do I want to get paid or should I take care of my family? But that is
Mm-hmm.
a real choice that the majority of people have to make. And that includes if you are a birthing parent and you give birth, there is job protection benefits on a federal level called FMLA. But that just means that you have your job guaranteed and you can come back to it. Doesn't mean that you're going to get paid. If you're in a position where you need that income, you give birth to a parent and you are faced with this choice of, well, I can't pay my bills. I have to go back to work. And there are so many stories of someone that just has to when they just gave birth for a couple of days ago and have not had the opportunity to bond with their kid and just has to go back to work to support their family. And so really, I get a front row view to that happening all the time. What we do is we build software that helps companies manage leave of absences for their employees because companies also fill that gap. So we talked about the state, but companies can offer a paid leave benefit for their employees because the federal government doesn't have a paid policy yet. So to fill that gap, companies would put together a paid policy so that people can step away and doesn't have to be faced with that impossible choice. So implementing that policy and also understanding how that interacts with insurance carriers that provide short-term disability and how that interacts with state laws, how that interacts with the federal job protection laws. It's a whole tangled mess of legislation and things that impact pay, and it becomes really complicated. So that's what we do is we build a software platform that really helps untangle that, both for the companies and then also to help guide the employees through that leave experience.
I'm sure, yes, for the companies. They're probably the ones buying it, the software. But man, also for parents who are like, what do I do here? Or other folks who have other kinds of leave that they need to take. And maybe, you feel kind of panicked or desperate. It's hard to navigate that stuff. So I'm glad that exists. We're in the home stretch here. I am very curious because the two of you have spent the vast majority of your careers working in technology or adjacent to technology or surrounded by it. You two talked or thought about individually even what the relationship you want your daughter to have with technology is as she gets older?
I think lightly, Adam, you brought up a really interesting point. Jeff and I were recently talking about it. Tech is going to be so central to everything and will continue to be for a lot of our lives and especially for Arden's generation. So we're aligned on wanting Arden to have a healthy relationship with technology, not afraid of it, but also not glued to a screen or some sort of technology 24/7. I'm excited about how AI, for instance, or technology can augment her life and her learning, but not be a replacement for, like entertainment or engaging with other people. So, as it pertains to the basics of technology, i.e., Miss Rachel and screen time, sure, light doses and extra parent slash babysitter were definitely game for that. But thinking about, okay, how can, for instance, she use ChatGPT as she gets older, still learning a lot of the fundamentals, but using ChatGPT as like a partner in crime to help her get to solutions faster. Because it'll inevitably be a part of our lives, we don't want to have her shy away from it altogether. But the reality is like, we'll just have to adapt on the fly, but we do want technology to be a part of her life.
It'll be really interesting to see. She's 14 months now. She's still, several years away from being school age, definitely elementary school age in kindergarten. It'd be really interesting to see 4 years down the road what school looks like and how different it looks like from today with the rise of, 2 years ago, we didn't have ChatGPT, for example. So be really curious. I'm keeping a close eye on it. I'm also thinking about that for my kids with like, what is college going to look like? Because they're closer to college. They're maybe equidistant to college as your daughter is to elementary school. So time will tell.
We grew up in the age where the internet was just starting to come online when we were kids. And then we had a smartphone, and we were the first generation that was sort of internet native. We kind of centrally grew up with that. Sure, we had memories of like not having that and having to play outside and things like that, but it was a central part of our experience. And it's really interesting to think through the fact that Arden is likely to grow with AI being a native experience of her and how that fundamentally changes what her world might look like. And it's really hard to predict that. It would have been impossible to predict how the internet would have impacted our world and has shaped our careers before that came into fruition. And it's the same thing. It's pretty impossible to predict all the ways that AI might fundamentally change what job options she may have, or how she's going to learn, or how she's going to interact with it in different ways. Like, is that going to be a partner of hers? Jamie and I are already seeing that in some of our own patterns, that when we need to talk something out, we'll use the chat feature on ChatGPT to just kind of rubber duck something and refine our thinking. And what happens when that's by default available to Arden in any moment where she just wants to talk to something? It's really interesting and hard to imagine how that's going to change everything.
Time will tell. And I am, maybe fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know, not great at the prediction business. So we'll see. Last thing that I wanted to ask you two is, both of you are parents with demanding professional lives. You work pretty much a full-time job. You've got a nanny from 8 to 4. Like, you're doing a lot. I talk to a lot of people who are a few years earlier than the two of you, and they're very nervous about starting a family because they don't know what the impact's going to be on their career or their travel plans or their life, like the things they like to do. I would just ask, are there any kind of final tips or examples that you might have for parents of your kind of like day-to-day experiences in balancing demanding professional lives with family? And were the two of you nervous before you got started with this? Do you think that that's an entirely normal thing for people to feel? And what do you tell people who are getting started on this journey?
Yeah, I'd say like the feeling nervous or being unsure is definitely a normal feeling. I would say the biggest takeaway is staying open-minded and adaptable. As I mentioned earlier, it's like when I think about my career and my priorities, pre-baby, pre-Arden, it was so different than like, oh, seeing her and being a mom. I was like, it could be hormones, it could be biology or something that fundamentally changes. Maybe it's the book, Die with Zero, but you're always evolving as a person. And as long as you keep an open mind and adaptable to new loves and new preferences or a way to find joy and meaning in life, you can always make parenthood a really cool experience. It doesn't have to be scary, but like approaching it to be like, hey, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to go all in. And if you do that, you can make it the experience that you want. Similar to maybe a lot of folks that you're talking to, Adam, that may be very career driven. It's like if they're going all in that, if they go all in parenting and career, yes, it is hard. It's not easy, but people get it done. They make it work and they find balance and happiness. So just keeping an open mind and being open to rebalancing that equation of happiness.
Yeah. Jeff, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I think it's totally natural to be nervous about becoming parents for the first time. I think that you do need to go into it eyes wide open, that you're not going to do all the same things that you did before. But it is entirely possible to find the one or two things that you really love and to still make sure that that happens. And I think the key thing to remember is those other things that you decide are not your top one or two priorities. Sure, they go away, but they are filled, like that time instead is filled with the joy of being able to have this family and this baby. And so there's something else that replaces it that is totally worth it and fills up your cup. So there absolutely is this opportunity to still hold true the things that are most important to you, but there will be sacrifices, but they'll be well worth it. To us, it's been well worth it. I've been really, really happy with the balance that we've been able to create as a family.
Awesome. Well, that is a very optimistic way of ending the primary part of our conversation, Jamie and Jeff. Last thing for you both before lightning round, and I promise we'll be quick. That's the name. How can people follow along or be helpful to you both, personally, professionally? Anyway, what can they do for you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jamie A. Lee, and my company is called JME Labs. So it's a play on words on my name, but also stands for the portfolio of work that I do. So connect with me to DM me, talk about parenting or whatnot. Or if you want to find a new Hyrox or a DECA training buddy, hit me up and we can race together in the future.
Yeah, I think I'm always interested in connecting to other people, especially entrepreneurs, builders, people in products. LinkedIn is the best place to find me. I'm just always interested in having really interesting conversations about how to kind of build community and the support systems that we all need of being parents and working in early stage startups in tech. We need each other to build on that knowledge and help each other out.
Yeah, we need that extended team. So maybe we'll add a few people to your extended team after this episode today. Okay, lightning round. Here we go. You can both answer, you can choose, you can delegate to the other person. Let's get started. What is the most indispensable parenting product that you have ever purchased?
I have always been surprised at like how Arden will just love playing with like a water bottle. Like I think we've given up on the fancy product that we think, oh, she's just gonna fall in love with. There's just like the most random things that she gets super obsessed with. And so just give her something to play around with and she's gonna love it.
Okay. Jamie, I'm going to popcorn over to you for the next one. What is the most useless parenting product you've ever purchased?
Bassinets. I think she used it once where it's like
Okay.
ideal in theory, but I was like, yep, that was a $500 item that was used once.
I think we may have had that same experience.
And on planes too, completely useless. We just put
Oh,
our things there.
yeah, exactly. Okay. True or false? There's only one correct way to load the dishwasher.
I think the answer is definitely yes. I don't know if Jamie will agree though.
I say false. I usually just throw everything in, and then when I come back to look at it later, it looks like a Tetris grandmaster. Just reshuffled everything and it's already in the wash.
So Jeff is doing this invisibly when you're not paying attention,
Yes.
Jamie. Okay. All right. I think Jeff wins on this one. Okay. Jeff, what is your signature dad superpower?
I have somehow gotten pretty good at putting Arden to bed really well and for her naps. You know, it's some sort of routine. I'm just really trying to comfort her and put her down. But like, I've gotten really good at just being able to do that super duper quickly. So we'll have friends over, whatever. Arden's got to be put down. I can just go and do that in a couple minutes and then come back. And they're like, wait, is Arden asleep? So I think that must be one of my dad's superpowers.
Okay. Jamie, what's your mom superpower?
I'd say trying to make Arden laugh. So whether it's like running around in circles while she is eating a meal or making funny faces at her or knowing where she's most ticklish, it's like, oh, if she's upset, okay, we're going to cheer you up and try to get a giggle out of you.
What is the crazier block of time in your house? 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 5 p.m. to 7 p.m.?
It's definitely 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. 6 to 8. Sometimes Arden's still asleep halfway through that, but Jamie's definitely asleep during that period of time. It's often very quiet
I am not
during
a
that
morning
period of time,
person.
but 5 to 7, Arden's very awake. Yeah, Jamie is ready to go and play and have some fun. And so 5 to 7, there's lots of things going on.
All right. I think there's always at least like one morning person and one not morning person in every household. This is good. It's usually good when it's not like the kid is the morning person and neither of the parents are. So even though Arden can't quite say any words, many words yet, if she had to describe each of you in a single word, what would it be?
I'd say mine would be Zoomies because she loves dogs.
Okay.
And she also thinks I'm just like running in circles, whether I'm doing like lunges with her on top of my shoulders or running around while she eats, trying to sing Old MacDonald and get her to sing with me.
I'm not sure about this one, but probably like sustenance bringer. Like I am the person like I'm making sure that she's got some food or bringing milk to her, and she's always signing to me, milk, milk, milk. She sees me and just is now just always being like,
Yeah, I
you know,
remember
give
that
me.
signal. Yep.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
All right. What is each of your favorite kids' movies?
For me, some of the kids' movies that stand out for me was not any of the Disney stuff. I just remember things like, I don't know if you remember the movie Blank Check, where a kid gets like a blank check and fills it in for it's probably like $1 million, and then got to buy all these things, buy a mansion and a house, all that stuff. I just remember those types of movies and really enjoying that and watching that with my sister.
I'm so basic. I'd say it's any one of the Disney movies because, like, I'm an only child, but I had a ton of cousins. And
Okay.
so we would watch a lot of Disney movies together. So I think it's the nostalgia.
Nostalgic movie can you not wait to force Arden to watch with you? Jeff, maybe this is blank check. I don't know.
I'm sort of excited to introduce Arden to some of the Disney movies because they're just like culturally so part of the milieu. Like everyone talks about them and they're kind of designed to be one in which you can enjoy that as a parent while the kid also watches. And so I am excited to kind of watch things together. I've already started to do some of that. We'll watch Planet Earth together, for instance, and just watch all the animals. That's really fun and entertaining. So we're starting to venture into that a little bit more right now.
All right. What is either of your go-to snack when you're hiding in the pantry from your daughter?
Anytime she sees anything that resembles a cracker, she has to have it.
That's what I do when I'm hiding in the pantry. And Jeff grabs the cracker to give to Arden. While we're both hiding, it's like, okay, what do we do? How do we divide and conquer? She loves a good cracker.
What is the worst experience that you've ever had assembling probably not a toy at this point, but maybe a piece of kids' furniture?
And I remember being on parental leave or even preparing for that and just needing to build the nursery and build all this different stuff. And it's just, it took forever. And you're trying to build stuff that's kind of maybe a little bit nicer than maybe just IKEA furniture. But like everything just has so many pieces. I mean, I can't imagine back in the day, you used to buy things already assembled and you just put it into your house. That seems so much better than trying to build something with 1,000 pieces in it and having to screw little things. If you look at Arden's room, everything looks okay, but there are pieces that are backwards. There are things where the screws definitely shouldn't be there, and you just make it work.
All right, last two. How long can a piece of food sit on the floor in your house and you will still eat it?
I think before it was like the 5-second rule, but now it's like, oh, is this a clean area that no one touches? Like a corner of the pantry that's clean, maybe like an hour. It's fine.
Last question. What is your take on minivans?
I'm pragmatic. I think that we need more space. I mean, we've got a Subaru right now that barely fits the things that we need to if we go on a road trip. And I'm definitely in my convenience phase of life. So whatever vehicle that allows me to easily take all the things and everyone's comfortable and happy, that's my preference.
Jamie, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today on Startup Dad. This was such a fun conversation. I loved having you both on, and I learned a lot about raising a 14-month-old. This has been fantastic. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you for listening to today's conversation with Jamie Lee and Jeff Okita. Startup Dad is available in all your favorite podcast players and YouTube. Just search for Startup Dad to find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.